Good evening. Today is Monday, December 19, 2022, and this is the 130th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. Before I begin my podcast today, I do want to take this opportunity to wish the members of our Jewish community a happy Hanukkah. The 8th-day Hanukkah commemorates the rededication during the 2nd century BC of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, where, according to Jewish traditions, the Jews had risen up against the Greek Syrian oppressors in the Maccabean revolt. Hanukkah this year began, of course, yesterday evening, December 18th, and ends on the evening of Monday, December 26th. Today, I am going to have a monologue discussion on the meetings that took place this past week in Africa with the Leaders Summit. Prior to me beginning on the discussions as to what happened there and how it affects our operations, especially for the Near East and Africa, there's a short AP video I want everybody to see.
Good morning.
President Joe Biden hosts heads of state from 49 African nations and the African Union in Washington as the White House looks to narrow a gaping trust gap. The three-day summit is the biggest international gathering in the U.S. Capitol since before the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
It means a great deal to have this time in person with you.
Biden administration officials played down their concerns about the clout of China and Russia in Africa, which is home to more than 1.3 billion people. Instead, administration officials tried to put the focus on their efforts to improve cooperation.
My view is actually the continent has been craving for just the U.S. to show up and lead. And the U.S. has not done that all the time.
There is considerable skepticism.
In Africa, we have the perception that the U.S. looked down on Africa. So with this summit, what makes you feel so comfortable?
We are bringing the resources to the table in significant numbers. And if you compare what the United States is committing over the next 3 years to what any other country is committing, I think we stack up extremely favorably.
Even before the summit officially began, the White House announced Biden's support for the African Union becoming a permanent member of the group of 20 nations and committed to spending $55 billion in Africa over the next 3 years. Biden has spent much of his first 2 years in office trying to counter fears about American leadership after 4 years of Donald Trump's America First foreign policy. With this summit, a follow-up to the first such gathering held 8 years ago by President Barack Obama, Biden has an opportunity to assuage concerns in Africa about whether the U.S. is serious about tending to the relationship.
The question is, the summit is an exciting opportunity that is coming for them to show that they really want to revamp and strengthen the relationship with Africa. But it comes with high risk. And the risk is, after 8 years, what do you have for us?
African leaders will be looking for Biden to make some major commitments during the summit, including announcing his first presidential visit to sub-Saharan Africa and efforts to bolster the continent's economy through investment and trade. Perhaps more importantly, it could be an opportunity for Washington to demonstrate that Africa is more than a battleground in its economic and military competition with Beijing and Moscow. Tracy Brown, Associated Press.
As you all saw, the AP report, that kind of gives everything in a nutshell as to what happened. But, the only thing that came out of that conference, of course, is, again, a memorandum of understanding. We have a copy of it. I could put up on a screenshot for our viewers to see. Just so our viewers understand, memorandum of understandings really don't have any kind of a legal enforcement mechanism behind them. It is a good first step of if tomorrow any of the leaders ever at the summit decide that they're going to go ahead and violate that memorandum of understanding. There's not much legal enforcement behind it that could be done. In the future, hopefully, the biggest thing that you could achieve is maybe treaties with individual nations, or even with the possibility of the African Union between the United States. Then once it's a treaty, it actually becomes law. It becomes U.S. law. And even the presidents of the United States following the current POTUS will not be able to really counter it, because it would be a violation of the U.S. law at that time. Africa, to us from the Near East side, was a very significant portion when it came to what we would have to do for future development under the lines of security. development and also at the same time governance. It is a good first step, but I think it's a step a little bit too late, given the fact that China has already put a lot of money into the region, and also Russia is significantly operational in Africa, to include using his Wagner Group capabilities within the African sub-Sahara areas and also the rest of the continent. The fight is really to try to get U.S. footprint within the former Republic of Congo, that has on many occasions reached out to the United States and has let us know that the Chinese have violated majority of the agreements that they have had with the Chinese government, especially about how it's basically raking the mining out of that region. We know, as far as our viewers are concerned, that Near East has made 2 travels. I have personally been twice within a year in Africa. We have interest in the South Sudan Christian issues. As you all know, we've even been raising money with United Assyrian Appeal to help the South Sudanese Christian, and this is our last month for that push on supporting for this year's mission, because they're all over Kenya. I do know that Kenya, Uganda have a major interest in ensuring that at least the weapon smuggling that is coming through, and some of it through those refugee camps, is countered. So as we have spoken to congressional leaders, I met with Senate staffers, and I actually have a Zoom meeting again. I'll follow up on what we might want to do with Africa, especially with South Sudan on Wednesday. It is very vital and important that we understand that Africa will be going through tremendous turbulence, especially with the shortage of food from 2023 to 2024. The major issues of this global famine will affect them much more directly than most people believe. That is why the Near East, my company, has been so engaged and involved there. I hope that the administration takes the steps needed to ensure that those memorandum of understanding and the commitments that have been made to financially be able to deal and counter with China, given the fact that Africa has become a battleground between the United States and also Russia and China, that regardless of the administration that may come next, that we keep those commitments and ensure that we are engaged at the lower levels with the various different governments, understanding that security is priority and understanding that development is where the money is going to be made, that is going to allow for that relationship to flourish. We will go back again. I will keep our viewers updated as to what is happening in the Africa region, and I'm hoping that finally the current administration is going to take some stronger steps, ensuring that even with possible force structures that are going to be introduced by the African Command and the various different areas of Africa to be able to counter the terrorist operations that will be probably expanding within the next year within Africa. With that said, I wanted to let our viewers just know that this will be our last podcast for the year. With Christmas and New Year's coming up and the holidays, we are going to come back again on January 9th. It's going to be our first broadcast of 2023. And we are going to start expanding into the areas and regions that some of our viewers may not have seen Near East operate in before, but most of it is probably going to be also, as much as we can, from on location to bring you the best possible information that you can use at the geostrategic level to understand exactly how this fight against China and Russia is starting to manifest itself. 2023 is really the only year that U.S. can have strategic effects both in the Near East and other regions. After the 2023 year, it will be very difficult if we haven't made significant gains from the United States to be able to counter what China has planned in its 50 to 100-year plan and what Russia may be planning, to include the possibility of a winter offensive in Ukraine. With that said, thank you very much for viewers and listeners for being with us. Again, if you can, our broadcasting does support the Christians of Northern Iraq with United as Sunni Appeal. And more importantly, this year, again, we're trying to close out our support for the Christians of South Sudan. I know it is difficult, especially with inflation being high, but any type of monetary support you could provide does help us to be able to support those individuals on the ground, to be able to give them some capacity to build a possibility of what they might be able to do, future lines of governance and development. And more importantly, thank you very much for Sim Production that has been with us for the past 130 episodes and has been actually doing a yeoman's work, being able to bring these type of broadcasts to you. God bless you all. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will see you on the back end again. God bless.